With the arrival of the moving truck, Miharu began to cry upon seeing her best friend leaving. Miharu was Haruto Amakawa's childhood friend. They lived in neighboring apartments and grew up together until Haruto's parents divorced, forcing them to part ways. Even before being separated, they already felt very special towards each other. Before leaving, Haruto promised that he would see her again, and Miharu swore that the two of them would marry one day. The years passed, and Haruto worked hard to be accepted into a prestigious school in the city where they both lived. His father finally allowed him to return as long as he got a part-time job to support himself since he needed money to cover his expenses. Looking around, he saw a girl and recognized her immediately. And just as he was about to call out to her, a guy named Takahisa approached her since they had arranged to do something together. When he was about to put his arm around her, another girl named Satsuki appeared, complaining that he had gone there with her. So, the three of them left together, leaving Haruto behind, who simply smiled, accepting the situation. Soon, the trio arrived at the place where Aki and Masato were waiting for them. Satsuki commented on how much they had all grown, and Masato replied, saying that the girl had become even more beautiful, which made Aki nervous and Satsuki glow with happiness. They were gathered to celebrate another year of school. However, on that same day, the five of them were transported to an alternate world. During the process, Aishia noticed something strange and quickly alerted Haruto. The rest of the group was lost in that bizarre universe, with no idea where they had ended up. And to make matters worse, there was no phone signal. Suddenly, a huge man with a sword approached them. Meanwhile, Haruto was heading southeast, guided by Aishia. Along the way, he encountered a strange magical cloud and decided to investigate it. In the middle of the fog, he found a pink cell phone. In another part of that world, in a camp full of armed men, the recently arrived teenagers were thrown into a cell with several others. Except for Miharu, who was taken by a man wearing a top hat. She tried to communicate with him, but he spoke a different language. Aki shouted to her friend, but a soldier banged on the bars to silence her. Amidst all of this, Haruto saw smoke in the distance and headed toward it, and that was where the group from Earth had been taken. As soon as the guards noticed a stranger approaching, one of them whistled to alert the others. They quickly covered the cages with tarps to hide the imprisoned children just as Haruto arrived, searching for the person who had dropped the cell phone he found. The man with the top hat, who seemed to be the leader of those men, claimed he had never seen that phone in his life. Assessing the situation, Haruto realized that starting a fight there would not be advantageous for him, so he apologized and turned to leave. However, Aki screamed for help in Japanese, which caught Haruto's attention. The group's leader commented that their new merchandise was a bit noisy, but Haruto responded that the people who had just spoken were the ones he was looking for and asked what was happening there. The leader was surprised to see that this boy spoke the language of the prisoners and ordered his men to kill him. As the men drew their weapons and began to surround Haruto, he quickly realized that they were well organized and accustomed to fighting as a team. The leader commented that the boy confused bravery with recklessness, but Haruto showed no signs of fear despite being outnumbered. On the contrary, he charged at one of his opponents, who managed to defend himself and counterattack with light bullet magic. While fighting the other enemies, Haruto thought of his plan to capture the leader as a hostage to force a negotiation, but he knew that wouldn't be easy. Realizing there was no other option, he drew his swords and took down two enemies in front of him. Seeing the intruder approach, the mage fired a fireball, believing it would hit his target, but Haruto emerged from the smoke, throwing his swords at the rival. The man dodged the incoming weapons, but this left him vulnerable to Haruto's swift attack, who grabbed the enemy's dagger and plunged it into his chest. With that, the remaining bandits hesitated to advance, and their leader was paralyzed with fear. Haruto removed his glove and set it ablaze, ordering the prisoners to be released, and the bandit leader immediately complied. Without delay, Haruto surprised Aki and Masato by speaking to them in Japanese. He promised that he would explain everything later, but first he needed to know if anyone else had been captured along with them. Masato mentioned that they had a friend in another carriage, so Haruto went there and broke the lock using his special technique. And upon looking inside, he was shocked to see that the prisoner was none other than Miharu, his childhood friend. After that, he led the three back while telepathically asking Aishia to meet him before sunset, and Aishia replied that she would bring Celia with her. As they watched the sunset, Miharu paused for a moment to admire it and asked Haruto if they could talk. She then thanked him for saving her and asked for his name. Haruto stammered and replied that, at the moment, he was being called Haruto. Miharu and Aki were left speechless upon hearing that name, and Haruto realized that the little girl was named Aki, recalling that Haruto had a younger sister, even though they hadn't seen each other in a long time. To confirm, he asked if something was wrong, but Aki responded that there wasn't. Masato then asked why Haruto didn't have a last name and introduced himself as Masato, Aki's younger brother. Haruto reflected that Amakawa Haruto didn't have a younger brother, and Masato also didn't carry the Amakawa surname. Deducing that perhaps Haruto's mother had remarried and had a child with another man, he then asked Aki for her last name, and she said it was also just Aki. Haruto promised to explain why he didn't have a last name once they reached a more comfortable place. Without wasting time, he found a suitable location and used his undoing ability to lift a large stone from the ground that contained his house within it. At that moment, Ishia arrived with Celia, speaking in Estalian, which was the language of that world. Celia was delighted to see her friend again, and Haruto introduced the people from Earth, explaining that Celia had once been his teacher. After the introductions, Aisha kissed her friend on the forehead, triggering a magical reaction. Then, she repeated the gesture with Miharu, creating a temporary connection that allowed them to understand each other's language. Haruto was surprised to discover that Aisha could do that, and she explained that it was only possible because he understood both languages. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to do it. With that said, Aisha admitted that she was hungry, and Haruto invited everyone inside the stone house. Once inside, he offered them a bath if they wanted one, while Masato celebrated the opportunity to take a bath. His sister Aki told him to stop being so excited, making everyone laugh. And when the girls gathered for the bath, Miharu discovered that Haruto's real name was Ryo, and that Aisha was a spirit who had made a pact with him. Celia was the one who shared this with Miharu. But since she had just met Aisha herself, she didn't know much about the details. Aki approached to understand a bit more of the conversation, and Miharu explained that Aisha was not human but rather a nature spirit. After the bath, it was time for everyone to eat, and Masato asked if they were in a fantasy RPG world. Haruto responded that he hadn't played many such games in his past life, so he wasn't sure. But it seemed to be something like that. Although it was a bit different from a game because there was no reset button there. Given the situation, Masato asked if things would have gone badly for them if Haruto hadn't shown up, and Haruto replied that they would probably have ended up as slaves. Celia then arrived, thanking Haruto for offering such a wonderful bath, and when Haruto noticed that she was wearing completely different clothes, she explained that Aki had lent them to her, saying it would be strange to wear a wedding dress again after a bath. Speaking of which, since the newly arrived group didn't have other clothes, Ryo decided that he would buy more essential items the next day. And Miharu reminded him that they had no money, but Ryo offered to cover any necessary expenses there. Celia asked where they would shop, and Ryo suggested Mandy as a good place. Celia was pleased with the idea and wondered if it would be possible to sell her wedding dress to get more money, but once again, Ryo said they didn't need to worry. And with that, he invited everyone to eat. Seeing the table full of food, Celia asked if Ryo had prepared everything, and he confirmed. During the meal, Ryo learned that the group had been brought to that world by a phenomenon caused by summoning magic. Miharu asked if there was any way to return to Earth, but Haruto admitted he had no answer for that because this situation was very different from his own reincarnation in that world. Aki commented that Haruto had died in a traffic accident when he was a university student, and asked if his memories returned to him when he was a child in this world. Ryo confirmed this and explained that because of that, he believed his experience wasn't of much significance to the newcomers. Celia reflected on everything and concluded that the 6 pillars of light they saw, along with the events of this year, the year 1000 of the Sacred Era, might be linked to the legend of the 6 wise gods. Ryo said that 1,000 years after the Divine or Demon War, 6 sacred stones would shine in different colors, and pillars of light would rise to the sky. Then, heroes clad in divine garments would return from beyond the world and, in place of the 6 wise gods, lead humanity. Even so, Ryo didn't believe they were the heroes mentioned in the legend, and Celia agreed. Miharu then recalled that they were with other people when they came to this world, specifically Satsuki and Takirisa, so perhaps they were somewhere around as well. And Ryo, although uncertain, considered this possibility. Miharu was worried because she and her friends were saved by Ryo, but the others might not have had the same luck, especially in such a completely unknown and hostile place. As the conversation was coming to an end, Ishia yawned at the table, stood up, and pulled Ryo toward the bedroom, saying she was sleepy and called him to rest after a long day. Ryo asked for a minute, but Aisha insisted as she had already used up a lot of energy that day. Just after saying that, she collapsed onto Ryo's chest, still managing to stay on her feet. Celia was completely flustered, thinking that escalated quickly. But the spirit explained that she was just recharging and that she always slept with Haruto. Seeing her teacher bewildered by this information, Ryo explained that there was a good reason for it. And visibly shaken, Celia shouted that he hadn't even taken a bath yet, while Miharu timidly raised her hand, offering to clean the table. Likewise, the siblings joined her to avoid watching the uncomfortable scene any longer. After that, Ryo explained to them what was actually happening, detailing the specifics. To avoid further discomfort, Ishia mentioned that she would sleep with Miharu because, even though she had less magical energy than Ryo, she also had some. It was then decided that Aishia and Miharu would sleep in one of the rooms, the siblings in another, Celia in one more, and Ryo in his own. Everyone then headed to their rooms to rest, with Ryo accompanying Celia to her room before returning to his own. He thought that he would have never imagined encountering Miharu again in this world, and wondered what she would do if she discovered that he held Haruto's old memories. However, he soon concluded that he was no longer Haruto, and that now he was Ryo. A long time ago, he had decided to dirty his hands in search of revenge against that man, and Yamakawa Haruto was already dead. At that moment, Celia knocked on her student's door, wanting to talk. Ryo invited her in and served tea to his teacher, something that hadn't happened in a long time. Taking advantage of the opportunity of being alone, Celia went straight to the point, asking where he had found Aisha and what this story about a past life was. And after saying all that, she realized she might have gone too far and apologized. Ryo, in turn, answered her questions one by one. First, he explained that he had memories of a past life and that this person came from the same world as Miharu and the others. That was why he understood Japanese. At this point, he recalled the moment when his teacher first found him in the alleys. Ryo regained the memories of his past life shortly before that, and the name of that person was Haruto. It was then that Celia realized he chose Haruto as a pseudonym because of that. In those memories, Ryo was 20 years old, and he was older than Celia. She commented that the boy always seemed strange and mature for his age, and thanked him for kidnapping her since that allowed them to be together. Although she was still worried about her father, at least she was relieved to be with Ryo. She wanted to let her father know that she was safe. So Ryo suggested that she write a letter. When she got excited about the idea, he assured her that they would go to a stationery store to buy pens and paper, and whatever else she needed for that. Meanwhile, in Beltran, the capital of the Beltran kingdom, Charles was informed by Rice that the recent events were disastrous and that no one could have predicted that his wife would be kidnapped. In response, Charles said that the culprit had been punished. And according to the reports, after Alfred's attack, there were no traces of him. However, Charles still had no idea where Celia was. Currently, the capital's borders were closed to allow for a thorough search of the entire region. Hearing this, Rice analyzed that the boy and the spirit had probably hidden Celia, which was a bold move on their part. Charles added that a hero had descended upon the kingdom, and his own father had taken him under his custody. Rice hoped that the hero would become a loyal ally to the kingdom of Beltran, but confessed that he had wished the kingdom had secured another sacred stone. Charles replied that the stone was with Princess Flora and Duke Ruganoth, and that by now, they were likely receiving the hero. It was a complicated situation because they could be considered traitors for aligning themselves with the kingdom of Galark. Speaking of that kingdom, Rice mentioned that among the guests were Lizalot and Cretia from the Rich Merchants Guild, a very talented woman. According to Charles, he thought there was no need to worry because she was only 15 years old and all, but Rice mentally disagreed, thinking that Lizalot and the Rich Guild were as much of a threat as Duke Ruganoth's faction. And if no action was taken soon, something bad could happen. The scene then shifts to Rodania, the capital of Rodan, where a girl named Rowana was serving food to a young man. He asked her to sit for a while because he didn't like seeing her standing, and Rowana politely accepted the invitation. Another nobleman then confessed that he had never thought he would have the honor of inviting a legendary hero to his home, and that if the young man wanted anything, he just had to ask. The boy found it amusing to be called a legendary hero, since these people seemed to believe that the novels published online reflected reality. A few days earlier, this young man was resting peacefully in his bed at home when he was suddenly thrown into a new fantasy world. Thrown into a field covered in grass, he stood up and noticed dozens of soldiers around him, which made him panic as he tried to understand where he was. Flora Beltram introduced herself as the second princess of Beltram, while the other man identified himself as Duke Gustavo Huguenot, the princess's guardian. And the boy, who ended up in that world by accident, realized that the arrival of these nobles seemed like something out of a hero summoning story. When Flora mistook him for a hero, he was certain of it. According to the prophecy left by the 6 wise gods, 1,000 years after the founding of the sacred era, heroes would appear wherever the sacred stones were. Flora believed that the katana in his hand was a clear sign that he was a hero. And without realizing it, the young man noticed he was holding a beautiful sword, which triggered his inner nerd. Soon he felt full of confidence and asserted that he understood the situation. Deep down, however, he thought the whole story was a bit flimsy, especially because the people in that world seemed to understand Japanese. At that moment, Flora asked for the name of her summoned hero, and he answered that his name was Sakata Hiroaki. Back to the present moment. He was sitting at a table full of food but had no idea of the true purpose of that meeting. Whatever the reason, he planned to act calmly and pretend to be in control of the situation. To be honest, He admitted he was a bit confused about the whole hero thing, so he asked if the sacred stone belonged to the princess who had brought him there. Flora thought so, and Sakata assumed that if he was brought there, he could probably go back. The princess also found it strange since the hero was not supposed to even mention that. Sakata began to believe he had been kidnapped since he had his own life in the original world and was brought to this place against his will. The princess apologized, saying that recent events had left her lost as well. Sakata replied that he wasn't blaming anyone, but clearly, he was the one at the greatest disadvantage there. Duke Stewart's son then commented that the hero was being disrespectful to the princess, so his father reprimanded him for interfering. After that, the Duke apologized for his son's aggressiveness and promised to explain everything about the situation the young man was in. In turn, Sakata was genuinely interested in the matter. Meanwhile, Ryo left his hidden cave to go shopping with Celia and Miharu. Miharu asked the two siblings to take care of everything properly while they were away, and Ryo explained that there was a barrier around the house, but that they still shouldn't try to leave. Suddenly, Aisha appeared and picked up Celia in her arms, flying through the sky. The siblings watched in awe, while Ryo asked if he could carry Miharu the same way, and as soon as she agreed, the four of them were soaring through the sky, and Miharu was enchanted by it. Celia asked Aisha how much she knew about Ryo, and she replied that she knew almost everything since Haruto's memories flowed to her through the pact they had. In other words, Aisha and Ryo shared these memories with their deeply connected consciousnesses, which was the nature of a spirit pact due to their closeness. With that, Celia admitted feeling a bit uncomfortable with the fact that Aisha knew a side of Ryo that she herself did not, but the spirit reassured her, explaining that Haruto had changed and was gradually learning to trust people. She added that if Haruto now knew good people, it was thanks to Celia, because when he was completely alone, she was the one who reached out to him. When they arrived at their destination, Ryo explained to Miharu why she needed to call Celia Cecilia. This was precisely to avoid her being recognized and all that. It was also the moment for everyone to change their hair color before entering the city, to avoid problems. Once done, they entered Amand, the merchant city of the Galaric Kingdom. At one point, Miharu asked why there was such a long line on the street, and Ryo explained that it was because of a mandio shop, a local specialty. The Rich Guild offered a variety of foods and sweets that resembled those from Earth. Soon, the group arrived at the Rich Guild, where they were greeted by Chloe, who was in charge of attending to visitors that day. Ryo asked Chloe to take care of his friends while he went out for about an hour, and Celia took the opportunity to try on some clothes upstairs. While Ryo was handling some matters, the girls were spending time at the guild, and Celia encouraged Miharu to try on some clothes as well, despite her extreme shyness. Though embarrassed, Miharu agreed and ended up trying on some outfits along with the others. Meanwhile, Ryo found no useful leads and realized that things were moving quickly with limited options. Chloe asked if Celia needed anything else, and she replied that she would like to see some stationery items. Ryo then returned and asked Miharu if she had found something she would like to buy, only to notice that she was holding a bra. He quickly turned away and apologized. In any case, he advised Miharu not to worry about him and to enjoy her shopping. After saying that, Ryo was preparing to leave, but Miharu asked him to try on an outfit she had picked for him. When he put it on, she realized how well it suited him, and all the other girls agreed. Seeing this, Ryo decided to keep the outfit since he was running out of options in his wardrobe. Chloe mentioned a promotion on men's clothing. If he bought another item, he would get a discount. Ryo praised the Rich Guild's sales skills, and Celia asked if she could choose the next outfit for him. Later, back at the inn, Liselot was informed that it would take some time before the borders would reopen. Liselot believed that Beltram wanted to control the flow of information about the matter. Because of this, she couldn't conduct her business, which essentially left her stuck there. Arya suggested that her mistress take the time to relax and have some fun, and the young woman liked the idea. After all, Duke Arbor's reputation had been ruined, which was quite amusing for the Galaric Kingdom and worthy of celebration. By the way, Arya expressed her sympathy for the Duke's fiancée, Celia, who was an old friend of hers. Arya suspected that someone hostile to the Arbor family was behind what had happened, while the blue-haired girl pointed out that amidst the chaos, heroes had appeared, and one was probably summoned to the Galaric Kingdom, which would be grand. Liselot concluded, saying that she needed to hurry to return as soon as possible. And back at Ryo's house, the girls brought an endless array of clothes that Celia and Miharu had chosen. They genuinely hoped that Ryo would like all of them. The siblings also tried on some, and in the midst of it all, Ryo lamented that he couldn't find specific information about Satsuki and Takahisa. However, it seemed true that the heroes had arrived as the legend of the 6 wise gods predicted. Ryo believed that the 3 Japanese people in his house were brought here for that reason, along with Takahisa and Satsuki, who might have come as heroes. According to the prophecy, there were 6 heroes, and perhaps those 2 were among them. Upon realizing that his older brother might be in this world, Akimazato expressed the intention to search for him. Ryo understood their concern but emphasized that they needed to learn the language and customs of this world before venturing out. Speaking of departing, Ryo mentioned that he knew some trustworthy people, namely the spirits, and believed they could offer valuable advice. Aishia, tired of everything, just wanted to eat, and Ryo agreed that it was time to prepare a meal. Miharu offered to help, and Ryo took the opportunity to announce that they would have Japanese food that night. Watching the two cook, Masato recalled how Miharu always felt uncomfortable around men but didn't seem to mind Haruto. Finally, Celia joined in, eager to learn how to cook, and it didn't take long for the kitchen team to prepare a delicious meal. Then, we see Ryo heading to the demi-human village, and everyone advises him to be careful on his way. Masato states that he will be fluent in Australian by the time Ryo returns, and Ryo asks Aisha to take care of everyone for him. She agrees, and Ryo takes a stone from his storage, using it to teleport to the demi-human village. Upon arriving at the spirit village, he finds Latifa, who is happy to see him again and hugs him. She welcomes him, and he asks if she's alright. She confirms she is, and Sarah, Alma, and Ophelia also come to greet him. They explain that they sensed a distortion in spatial energy, so they guessed he might have returned. Ryo then says that this time he came to consult with the elders about something, and Sarah mentions that she will inform the elders right away. The scene shifts to Ryo explaining the situation to the elders, and they realize that the anomalous torrent of mana that came rushing there originated from the Stral region. Ryo mentions that this may have been the result of those 6 pillars of light, and he believes these pillars were some kind of space-time magic. He speculates that the pillars were used to summon people from another world to this place, and informs them about the rumors surrounding the 6 heroes in the Stral region. Ursula asks Ryo why he thinks the heroes were summoned from another world, and he explains that it's because he took in a boy and 2 girls who used to live in that other world. The elders wonder if the 3 are heroes, but Ryo says no, explaining that he found them in a place that wasn't connected to the pillars of light. However, they were with 2 other people before being transported, and he believes that those 2 may be the heroes while these 3 were caught up in the summoning and taken by mistake. One of the elders then asks if he was able to communicate with those from the other world, and he responds that he did because he knows their language. This raises several questions in the elders' minds, and Ryo explains that in his past life, he also lived in that other world. The elders have difficulty understanding this, and he mentions that he will explain it on another occasion. He then hopes that the explanation provided so far is enough for them to understand the situation, and the elders agree to set the matter aside for now. He says he also has a request to make. They obviously state that they will do whatever is possible to help, since it's a request from him. And Ryo asks if it would be possible to let the 3 he mentioned, along with 1 other person, stay in the village for now. They ask him to elaborate a bit more, and he explains that he's looking for clues on how to return these 3 to their world. But it will be difficult to act while these people are under his care. He knows that the villagers are much more skilled than he is when it comes to space-time magic, and they understand what he's trying to convey and agree to take them in. One of the elders asks who the 4th person is, and he mentions that it is a teacher to whom he owes a lot and who was being forced into marriage. So he rescued her on the day of the wedding. The elders laugh upon hearing this, thinking he is quite the charmer, and agree to take care of everyone, but with the condition that the 4 will keep the village's information a secret when they return to the Stral region. Ryo agrees to explain this to them and mentions that he will depart tomorrow to bring them back. The scene then shifts to him talking with Latifa in private, and he asks if she managed to understand today's discussion. She says she did, and he apologizes for talking about his past life without her permission. He mentions that he wouldn't have been able to explain things to the elders without revealing that, and she asks if she should also tell them about her origins. Ryo says she doesn't need to force herself to do anything, and she asks if the people he mentioned earlier are Japanese, to which he responds yes, and she asks if he told them about his Japanese origins. He says he did, and that if he hadn't, there would have been no way to explain how he understands their language. She states that it should have been a secret between the 2 of them, and he thinks she is being cute at that moment. He then tells her that even if other Japanese appear in this world, it won't change the fact that she is special to him. He reminds her that he told her he was in love with his childhood friend in his last life, and that he also had a younger sister. She remembers clearly, and he says that one of the people he rescued is that childhood friend, and the other is the sister he spoke of. He mentions that he did not tell them he has the memories of Haruto Amakawa, and she wonders why. Our protagonist explains that they are already confused by being in a world different from what they're used to, and he didn't want to overwhelm them further. He hopes that Latifa also won't reveal this to them, and Latifa asks if he actually wants to tell them about it. But he says he wants to keep it a secret between the 2 of them, saying he may have to tell someone one day, but not now, and hugs her. The scene then cuts to Haruto leaving the village the next day, and the elders wonder when he will return with the others. He says it will be in 2 weeks, and Latifa asks him to take care of himself, and with him promising to be fine, he sets off on his way. In another scene change, we now see Liselot reporting to King Francois Galarc about the events that took place in the royal capital of Beltrum, and he says he has another request for her. He asks her to summon Duke Huguenot, and she wonders what he will be doing there. He explains that the sacred stone in his kingdom has summoned a heroine, which is why they are planning to invite ambassadors from neighboring kingdoms to host a reception to introduce the hero. He mentions that he would also like to invite the hero from the kingdom of Beltrum for this occasion, and hopes that she will deliver the letter on his behalf. She agrees. And he mentions that he has heard that the hero of Beltrum is named Sakata Hiroaki. Liselotte is surprised to hear this and thinks that the name feels nostalgic. She realizes that this person might be from Japan but says nothing to the king about it. She then asks for the name of the hero summoned in their kingdom and learns that it is Sumeragi Satsuki. The king speculates that the heroes might be from the same land since their names are similar, and he asks Liselotte to meet his heroine, instructing his daughter to guide Liselotte to Satsuki. Liselotte then meets the heroine, who introduces herself. The scene then cuts to Rice observing Amande from a distance during the night. He thinks he can understand why the Rika Merchant Guild has its headquarters in this city. We see that he is surrounded by some zombie-like monsters, and he thinks he has found excellent raw material there. With that, he orders the monsters to find anyone with large amounts of mana in the vicinity of Amande and bring them to him alive, ordering them to kill as many unnecessary witnesses as possible and giving them a deadline until the following night. He believes that with this move, he will have all the puppets he needs, deciding to use this last opportunity to make money. After that, he plans to stay under the radar for a while. In yet another scene change, we now see Celia teaching Masato the Australian language. He is having some difficulty but starts to grasp it. Celia tells him that he has improved a lot since they started 2 weeks ago. And in the kitchen, Miharu asks Aki if Haruto will return soon. Aki says that Haruto is all Miharu has been talking about since the previous night and wonders how long they will continue living like this. She says she should have started a new school term by now, but instead, she was sucked into this world and has no idea where Takahisa and Satsuki are. She thinks she may never see her mother or anyone else she knew again. And Miharu tries to comfort her. Aki asks Miharu if she isn't worried, and Miharu says she is. But she has Aki, Masato, and also Haruto and the others, mentioning that it makes her feel calmer. Aki wonders if Miharu doesn't want to return to their old world, and Miharu confirms she does. But panicking won't help. Haruto is already doing his best, and all they can do now is trust him. Aki then asks what Miharu thinks of Haruto, and Miharu mentions that in her old world, she used to feel anxious around men, but whenever she's with him, it feels like she's having fun. Miharu says that he is reliable and a good person, and perhaps it also has something to do with the fact that he shares the same name as Aki's brother, Haruto. Aki becomes annoyed upon hearing this and mentions that comparing Haruto with her brother is simply rude. Miharu apologizes, and Aki does the same after realizing her mistake, then steps outside to calm down. Outside, she thinks she's an idiot for blaming Miharu when she did nothing wrong and wonders if Miharu is still in love with Haruto Amakawa. While she is completely lost in thought, Miharu appears there. They then notice the monsters from earlier in front of them, and the two wonder what those creatures are. They think they need to get back inside the house, but the monsters break through the barrier, attempting to attack them, yet Aisha saves the two. She then fires at them, and Masato hears the noise from inside the house. He wonders what that was, and Celia tells him to stay put while she goes to check. The girls ask Aisha what those were, and she says they were monsters likely attracted by the barrier's magical energy. She realizes that the monster is still alive even after taking her attack and remembers her promise to Rio to protect everyone. Two of the monsters try to attack together, and Aisha manages to stop one of them, but the others break through, and Celia takes care of them. The monster tries to attack again, but Haruto jumps in from above to save them and apologizes for being late. He then realizes that the monster that just attacked is strong and asks Aisha if she knows anything about them. She says she only knows that they seem to be monsters and that the darker one is stronger than the other two. Rio then decides to draw the darker one and leaves the gray ones to Aisha. She understands, and he prevents the darker monster from escaping. The monster attacks him, but he dodges and manages to immobilize it. He tries to see if the monster can understand him, but he finds that it doesn't and stabs it with his sword. The monster then says something to him and dies, leaving behind a crystal. Upon seeing the crystal, Rio thinks that it must have been a monster and notices that Aisha has also defeated the other monsters. Rio then thanks his teacher for the help, but mentally he only remembers that the monster asked to be killed by him. After that, Aki apologizes for leaving the house even after Rio asked her not to, And Miharu also apologizes, saying that Aki only went outside because she said something insensitive. Ryo changes the subject, saying that he smells something good and wonders if they're making amuris. Miharu confirms, and Celia mentions that they should eat since she's hungry, and Masato agrees. Ryo says he's also starving, and Miharu and Aki go to serve the food, but before they leave, Ryo informs everyone that they will be moving houses soon. After that, we see the surviving monsters returning to Rice with some humans, and he notices that one group is missing. He wonders if they were killed by his targets and states that it's not easy to kill a group of revenants. He thinks his plans will be delayed since their numbers have been reduced. But for now, he decides to just make more puppets, wondering how many will return to him this time.